Hello everyone and welcome back to our share in Dirshu B'Halacha. We're holding today on Reish Nun Amid Aleph. We are in the middle of Siman Shin Pei Beis and we're in the middle of Sif Aleph. So if you remember, we are speaking about somebody who lives in a chotzer together with an Eina Yehudi, together with a non-Jew. And the question was, does the non-Jew aser on the Yidden who live in the chotzer or not? And what the Mechaber said yesterday was, when you have one Yid living alone together with a non-Jew in a chotzer, then the non-Jew does not aser on the Yid. And if you remember, the Berurah brought down the reason for that is because it's not a davar that's shchiach. It's not considered commonplace for a Yid to be living alone in a chotzer together with a non-Jew, because the non-Jews are chashud and ashvichas damim. The Yid has to be afraid that the non-Jew is going to kill him. And therefore it's not common for a Yid to be living with a non-Jew, and for that reason they weren't geyser. They didn't say that the guy is going to aser on the Yid. However, once you have two Yidden living in two houses, and then there's also a non-Jew living in a house, then the non-Jew is going to aser on the Yidden, and then the Yidden would have to be seicher rishus. They would have to rent the rishus of the non-Jew from him so that they could be matir the chotzer with an iruvei chatzeros. And we mentioned yesterday that the reason for this whole thing is because the Chazal did not want Yidden living together with Goyim. They wanted to create a situation where the Yidden are going to have to go over to the guy and ask the guy if they could be seicher rishus from him. The guy is not going to be happy with this. He's going to be afraid of Maisik Shafim, that they're doing some kind of heebie-jeebie stuff over here. And maybe they're superstitious and they don't know what's going on. So they're not going to be happy. They're not going to want to do it. And it's going to create a situation where it's uncomfortable for the Yidden to be living together with the guy. So they're either going to move out, they're going to buy the property from the guy, or whatever it is, they're going to have a situation where they're no longer going to be living together with the non-Jew. Now we turn to the top of Reish Nun Amud Aleph and we go to the words of the Ramah. On the top line, Hagah, the Ramah says, Yisrael shehiskir oihishil beisai le'enoi Yehudi, enoi oiser alav. If a Yid either rents out or loans his house to a non-Jew, then the non-Jew is not going to aser on the other Yid in the chotzer. Now the words translated literally of the Ramah says that you have one Yid, and the Yid rented out his house to one guy. And now you have one guy living in the chotzer and one Jew living in the chotzer. Over there we don't need the Ramah to tell me that the guy doesn't aser, because the guy never asers when there's only one Yid. So obviously you have, living over here, you have at least two Yidden. And then you have one of the Yidden has another house, and he rented it out to a guy. So now you have a guy and you have two Yidden. Normally the guy would aser on the Yidden. Over here, says the Ramah, you should know that in this case, where we're talking about the Yid rented the house to the guy does not aser on the Yid. Why is that? Says the Ramah, because the Yid did not rent out his house to the non-Jew so that the non-Jew should create a problem for him and should prohibit him from being metaltal in the chotzer. He never had that in mind. So for that purpose, he didn't rent it to him. Now, let's first take a look at the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah says, "A nice cut in Zion, Deloy Hiskir." We say we have an umdana. That means that we assume that when the Yid rented out to the non-Jew, he didn't rent out to the non-Jew that the non-Jew should aser on him. Seif avodas hakodesh laharashba, and the Rashba Seif avodas hakodesh kasav. The Rashba says, "Oid tam ledin zeh." Another reason for this halacha. She'ein darko shel Yisrael lahasker or lahashil la'akum bayis b'chotzer shehu sharui b'soicha. If you remember, like I mentioned in the beginning of this year, we said yesterday, one of the reasons why when you have only one Yid and one guy, the guy does not aser on the Yid, is because it's not shchiach. It's not commonplace for a Yid to be living alone with the guy in the chotzer. So too over here, says the Rashba, it's not common that a Yid would rent out to a guy a house in the chotzer that he lives in. He doesn't want to live with a guy, so it's not commonplace, so we didn't make a gzera. And the Chazal didn't make the gzera by something that's not shchiach, by something that's not commonplace. So that's another reason. So far we have two reasons here why when a Yid lends or rents to a guy, we say the guy doesn't aser. We have the reason that the Ramah himself said, because we assume that the Yid did not rent or lend to the guy so that to create a situation where the guy should aser on him. So he never had that in mind, and he didn't rent it to him for that purpose. So for that purpose, it's not rented to him. And now we have the Rashba who says that it's not shchiach. V'ayin bebir hagra bekan. The Mishnah Berurah also brings down from the Gra, le'el b'simen shenayin, shedai toy, according to the Gra, the dafka b'shehisna hamasker oy hamashil, sheyachal l'salkoi b'chol shah sheyirtze. The only time the guy who's renting does not aser on the Yid is if when the Yid rented to the guy, he made it very clear tonight. And he said, I'm renting you this apartment, but I could throw you out whenever you want. If that's what he said, if he said I could throw you out whenever you want, then the guy doesn't aser. But if he rented to him stam, but if he can't remove the guy, then the guy really lives there. Then then according to the Gra, he's asers on him. So over here we have the halacha that when the Yid lends or rents to the guy doesn't aser. We have the reason of the Ramah, because he didn't rent it to him for that purpose. We have the reason of the Rashba, that it's not commonplace, so the Takanos Chachamim doesn't pertain over here. And now we have the Gra who disputes this, and the Gra says that this whole halacha, that the guy doesn't aser when he was renting from a Yid, only applies if there was a Tanai, a very clear Tanai, that the Yid could throw him out whenever he wants. Now, I gave you the scenario where you had this chutzner, where you had two Yidden living there. One of the Yidden had a house to rent out, and he rented it to the guy. So there's a guy and two Yidden. Take a look at the Bir Halacha in Dibur HaMaschil Einoi Oyser Alav. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Upashut, it's a davar pashut, it's very clearly understood. The Lav Dafka Alav Einoi Oyser, that when the Ramah says that the guy does not aser on him, literally that means he doesn't aser on the one who rented him the apartment. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Lav Dafka Alav Einoi Oyser, it's not only on the one that rented him the apartment that he doesn't aser. Elagam al hacherim hadarim sham einoi oyser. He also doesn't aser on the other residents of the chutzner. If there are 20 Yidden living in the chutzner, and one of them rented out a house to a non-Jew, don't think that the Ramah means that the non-Jew doesn't aser on the one resident of the chutzner that rented him the apartment, but he does aser on everybody else. No, he doesn't aser on anybody. Because if that would not be true, if the halacha was that he only doesn't aser on the one fellow who rented him the apartment, that wouldn't accomplish anything. If he asers on all the other Yidden, so that they cannot be metaltal from their houses to the chutzner, or from the chutzner to their houses, then automatically he's also going to be aser. Because once the other 19 residents are aser, then the one resident who rented out to the guy is also aser. And the reason for this is because, like we said many times already before, the lashon of eruv. What does eruv mean? Eruv means mu'uriv, that everybody is mixed together. If the halacha would be that the other 19 people are not allowed to be metaltal in the chutzner, then the one fellow who's renting out the apartment also would not be allowed to rent in the chutzner, because if he's mutter and they're aser, then they're not mu'uriv. So that cannot possibly be the halacha. The Chen Kasav beBirkei Yosef, and he says that he saw this in the Birkei Yosef as well. So now, let's say you had a scenario where the one who's renting out to the apartment to the non-Jew doesn't live in this chutzner at all. You have a Yid who owns a bungalow colony. He owns 20 units in a chutzner. He rented out 19 of them to Yidden, and he rented out one to a guy. But he doesn't live there at all. Now the reasoning of the Ramah doesn't apply. The Ramah said the reason the guy doesn't aser on the Yid is because the Yid didn't rent it to him so that he should aser on him. But now that's not negay, he doesn't live there. So you can't say, oh, he didn't rent it to him so he shouldn't aser on him. He wouldn't aser on him anyway, he doesn't live there. So does the guy now aser on the other Yidden that live there? So the could be that yes, could be he does aser on the other goyim. Maybe now this guy does aser on all the other Yidden in the chutzner. V'chein kosa b'sefer Chemen Moshe b'simin shin pei daled. Indeed, the Chemen Moshe says this. V'chein matzasi b'birkei Yosef b'simin zeh shemetzadid kain. Even if the Yid who's renting to the guy doesn't live in the Chatzar, you still say that the Yid who rented to the guy did not rent to the guy to create a problem for his fellow Yidden. So this Yid rented 19 units to Yidden and 1 unit to a guy. We don't say the guy is going to aser on the other 19. The Yid didn't rent to the guy to create a problem for the other Yisraelim. However, Valanias Daiti Nira, the Chavetz Chaim says over here that in his humble opinion, Valanias Daiti Nira, Iker Kechemen Moshe or Birkei Yosef, he wants to paskin, he's mitzaded like the Chemen Moshe, the Birkei Yosef, that the guy would aser on the other Yidden, Meyacha she'ikr dina de Ramah tzarchin, because he says that this whole halacha of the Ramah is very hard to understand. U'kamoshe niskashu kol ha'achrayim, u'kamoshe kasavdu gam anu b'Sha'ar Tzion. If you look at the Sha'ar Tzion, Ois Cotton Vav, the Chavetz Chaim brings down a very strong kasha on this Ramah. He asks on the Ramah, what are you saying? The Ramah says that the guy doesn't aser on the Yidden because the Yid didn't rent to the guy in order so that the guy should aser on him. Asks the Chavetz Chaim, like all the Achronim. He says the reason for the Takon of Chazal was because they didn't want you living with a guy. So now we're going to say, the Yid didn't rent to the guy so that he should aser on him. The reason the guy asers on him is not because you wanted him to aser on you. The reason the guy asers on you is the Chachamim made a Takon, they don't want you living with a guy. That reasoning still applies. So why is it that we could say this idea? Where does this concept come from? That just because the Yid didn't want to rent to the guy so that the guy should aser on him, now the guy doesn't aser on him. The Chazal said that the guy should aser on the Yidden so that the Yidden shouldn't live amongst Goyim. And that reasoning still applies. Therefore, the Chavetz Chaim says in this Birkei Yosef, since the whole din of the Ramah is very schwer, the whole din of the Ramah is difficult to understand, we're not now going to go ahead and be makel and like the Chai Adam and say that that even in a case where the Yid who's renting to the guy doesn't live in the Chatzar, still the guy doesn't aser on the other Bnei HaChatzar. He says, no, we're going to go like the Chemen Moshe, the Birkei Yosef, that if the Yid doesn't live in the Chatzar and he rents to a guy, then the guy is going to aser on the rest of the Bnei HaChatzar because we don't have the svara anymore that the Yid didn't rent to the guy so that he should aser on him. Now we go back up into the words of the Ramah. We're on the second line in the Ramah. By me, it's in the middle of the line. It's right by the Ois Cotton Ches of the Mishnah, for the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Ramah. So far the Ramah said, if a Yid rented to a guy, so then the guy does not aser. Aval, im habayis shel eino Yehudi. Let's say we have the opposite case almost. Let's say there's a house in the Chatzar that belongs to a non-Jew. Usechara Yisrael mimenu. And a Yid rented the house from the non-Jew. But ve'ena Yehudi dar babayis imoi. But the guy retained one room in the house, and the guy lives together with the Yid in the house. So now, ein schiras habayis moil le'inyan schiras ha'erev. In this situation, so again, let's say we have a chutzner. It has 5 houses that have Yidden living in it. Now there's a 6th house. The 6th house belongs to a non-Jew. But a Yid came and rented the house from the non-Jew. But the non-Jew retained one room in the house, and the non-Jew still lives in the house. So now we have a non-Jew living in the chutzner, and he's living in his own quarters. He's living in his own room. So since there's more than one Yid, there's another 5 Yidden living in the chutzner, so he's going to aser on the Bnei HaChatzar. So really you have to rent rishus from him. You have to be masker rishus from the guy. Now, the Yid who's renting from the guy, let's call him Ruvain. Ruvain is renting from Tony, the non-Jew. Now, all the Bnei HaChatzar, they have to be masker rishus from Tony so that they can make it a Ruvei Chatzeros. Maybe you could say that since Ruvain is already renting the house, he's paying him $1,000 a month for the house, maybe we could include in the $1,000 a month that not only is he renting the house from Tony, he's also being masker rishus from Tony, so that the Bnei HaChatzar can make it a Ruvei Chatzeros. Says the Ramah, no, that you cannot do. Ein schiras habayis moil, the $1,000 rent that Ruvain is paying Tony every month, that does not help le'inyan schiras ha'erev. that does not accomplish being maskir rishus from Tony to make the Erev. You got to go over to him and you got to say, we want to be maskir rishus. You got to give him another quarter or whatever it is. You got to make a separate deal. It's not wrapped up in Ruvain's deal with Tony. Says the Mishnah Berurah Katan Ches. Avalim Abayis, Pirish. What's the explanation of this case? Deloy nemo de schiras hatzarich le'inyan heter tilto nichlal b'schiras habayis. You cannot say that the rent, this idea that you have to be maskir rishus from Tony, you cannot say that that's wrapped up together with the deal where Reuven is renting the house from Tony. Mishum de umdana de muchachu, because you'll say it's an umdana de muchach. An umdana is an assumption. You'll say that it's an umdana de muchach. It's a very clear assumption. Reuven will say, listen, I'm renting the house from Tony. Certainly I know that I'm renting from a guy, and I know that Tony is remaining here in the house. He's living in a room here in the house. Obviously I don't want Tony to aser the chutzner on all of us Yidden. So obviously when I'm paying him the $1,000 a month, I also have in mind that I should cover the schirus that we have to be maskir rishus from him. Maybe that's an umdana demuchach, maybe that's a very clear assumption, and maybe we should say that way. And now you don't have to make a separate deal of being maskir rishus from the non-Jew. Kamash Balan, the Ramah comes to teach us the lo yamrin anachi, that we do not say this. We don't say this assumption. Rak b'maskir v'loy b'seicher. By a maskir, when you're renting a house to a non-Jew, then the Ramah said previously, then we have an assumption that when you rent out a house to a non-Jew, you didn't rent it out to him so that he should make a problem for you, and therefore the guy does not aser on the Yidden. But in the other direction, when you're renting from a guy and you're paying the guy, we don't say that there's an assumption that when you pay the guy, you're also paying him to be maskir rishus. And therefore you have to make a separate deal to be maskir rishus from the guy. Ice Katan Ches, the Ramah said that the non-Jew retained a room in the house and he's living together with the Jew in the house. The Nachri, the guy lives together with the Yid in the house. Ritzayne Loimar, HaNachri HaMaskir. The guy who's renting out the house to the Yid, he's still living in the house. Yois Katan Yod Babayis Imoi. He's in the house together with the Yid. Umayri Sheyesh Leilaha Akom Cheder Meyuchad. But we're talking about a case where the guy retained his rights over one room, and he's got his own room. He lives in a specific room. Why does it have to be that way? If that was not the case, if the guy did not retain one room for himself, rather what he did was he rented out the whole house to the Yid, and then he told the Yid, listen, the whole house is yours. You could go into every room that you want. If you don't mind, I'm going to sleep in the extra bedroom. But you come in whenever you want. If that was the case, then the guy would not aser. Why? Because then le'gara mischiroi u'lekitoi shala akum. Because then the Yid would be no worse than either a schiroi, a full-time employee, or a lekitoi, a part-time employee, shel ha'akum of the Yid, v'lo yitztarich liska rishusai, and then you would not have to go to the non-Jew to be maskir rishus. I'll explain this in a moment. V'ayin b'sif tezvav masha kasav dusham. What the Chavetz Chaim is referring to over here is, we're going to see a halacha later on in the Siman, that when you have to be maskir rishus from a guy, when you have a situation where you have to go to the guy and you have to rent rishus from him, sometimes you don't have to go straight to him. Let's say the guy has a Yiddish employee. He has a Yiddish employee that lives together with him, either a full-time employee or a part-time employee. Since this employee lives together with the guy, and he has rishus in all of the guy's property, in all of his apartment, so he, by himself, could act as an agent of the non-Jew, and he could rent out the non-Jew's rishus to the other Yidden. Therefore, says the Mishnah Berurah over here, when the Ramah says that the non-Jew is living together with the Jew that he rented out his house to, he must mean that he's living in a separate private room that he retained full rights to, and the Yid has no rights to it. Because if the Yid had rights to that room, then the halacha would not be that you have to go to the guy and you have to be maskir rishus from the Goy. Then you would be allowed to go to the Yid, and the Yid himself could be masker the Rishus. You would not need the Einoi Yehudi. Okay, says the Ramah Weiter, right by the Ois Cut and Yod Aleph for the Mishnah Berurah. Yisrael shehishil oihisker bayis lechaveroi b'mokim shedarim einam Yehudim. Let's say you had a Yid that owned 3 houses in a chutzner. Then there was a 4th house in the chutzner, and a non-Jew lives in that 4th house. The Yid who owns the 3 houses, he lives in one, and he rented out the other 2. So Ruvain owns 3 houses. Ruvain lives in one house. He rented out the 2nd house to Shimon. He rents out the 3rd house to Levi. Then there's a 4th house that Tony lives in. Now, there's an interesting catch in this case. Ruvain is the landlord over house 2 and house 3. And Ruvain has a refrigerator in each house. He has furniture in each house. He has stoves in each house. So, if you remember a halacha that we learned previously, in such a case, Ruvain has a tfisas yad. Ruvain has a certain authority over the other 2 houses, because he owns property in both of those houses that the people who are renting cannot throw out. On Shabbos, you can't take the refrigerator out of the house. So since Ruvain has a tfisas yad in house 2 and house 3, if the only ones that would be living there would be Ruvain, Shimon, and Levi, you would not even need it in Ruvain Chatzeros. Because since Ruvain has a Tfisas Yad in Shimon's house and a Tfisas Yad in Levi's house, Ruvain, Shimon, and Levi all live together. Shimon and Levi are really considered guests of Ruvain, because Ruvain is a Tfisas Yad over their houses. So therefore, if it was just Ruvain, Shimon, and Levi, you wouldn't even need it in Ruvain Chatzeros. But now it's Ruvain, Shimon, Levi, and Tony. So now the question is, does the tvisas habayis that Ruvain has over Shimon's house and over Levi's house, does that make that Ruvain, Shimon, and Levi are now one? And now Tony is a non-Jew that's living only with one Jew in the chutzner? So now you don't have to be masker rishus? Or do we still look at Shimon and Levi as being separate? So now you have Ruvain, Shimon, and Levi. You have 3 Yidden living in the chutzner, and then you have Tony. So now Tony answers on Ruvain, Shimon, and Levi. So that the Ramah says, Yisrael shehiskir lehiskir bayis lechaveroi b'makim shedarim einam Yehudim. If a Yid lends or rents out a house to another Yid, and there's a guy living over there, even though Ruvain has a tfisas habayis in the other house of the other Yid or of the other Yidden, loy mahani, that is not effective to make them one. Yehudi, and you still have to be masker rishus from the non-Jew. Says the Mishnah Berurah in Ois Cut and Yud Aleph, Yisrael shehiskir b'makim shedarim nakrim. Ritzaynai loymar. What the Ramah wants to say with this halacha is sheYisrael sheyesh lo shnei batim b'chatzar. When you have a Yid who has 2 houses in a chatzar, she'eino Yehudi darba, and there's a non-Jew who also lives there. V'hu darba bayis echad, and this Yid, he's living in house number 1. V'hashniya, and house number 2, hiskir li Yisrael acher. Ruvain rented out that house to another Yid. V'yeshloi bebayis tfisas yad, and Ruvain retains a tfisas yad in the house that he rented out to Shimon. Dahainu shehishu by kalim she'enam nitalim b'Shabbos. He has utensils in the house that cannot be removed on Shabbos, like a refrigerator and a stove. Umachma zeh ain't tzrichin la'ariv b'neihem. So now, if it was just Ruvain and Shimon, they would not need it in Ruvain Chatzeros. Kamoishen is bar b'simin shinayin, like we said previously in Shinayin. The Kamash Balan, the Ramah wants to teach me here. Da'afilu hachi einam chashuvim kechad. Ruvain, Shimon, and Levi are not looked upon as being one Yid. Utzrichim liskar me'akum, and they still have to be masker rishus from the non-Jew. The tvisas yad le'odif me'im ervu beineim. The tvisas yad that Ruvain has in the house of Shimon and Levi doesn't make it better than if Ruvain, Shimon, and Levi would have joined in the Ruvain Chatzeros. In other words, let's say you have 4 houses in a chutzner. Ruvain lives in one, Shimon lives in one, Levi lives in one, and Tony lives in the 4th. And Ruvain, Shimon, and Levi have nothing to do with each other. There's no landlord here. They're each private homeowners. So there's no tfisas yad. Let's say Ruvain, Shimon, and Levi, in that case, made in a Ruvain Chatzeros. So we're not going to say that Ruvain, Shimon, and Levi are one, and now Tony lives in a chutzner with one Jew. No, it's like we said before. Their Eruvei Chatzeris doesn't work without being Maskir Rishus from Toni. So Tfisas Yad is not stronger than actually making an Erev. So if you have Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, and Reuven owns Shimon's house and Levi's house, and he has a Tfisas Yad in their houses, that's not better than if Reuven, Shimon, and Levi would have made an actual Eruvei Chatzeris. So you still have to be Maskir Rishus from Toni. Sif Beis. In bitlu Yisraelim rishusam le'echad mehem kedei sheyichashev ki yechidi etzalein Yehudi einay moyel. A similar halacha. Let's say you have Reuven, Shimon, and Levi living in a chutzner, each one in their own private house, and Toni lives in the fourth house. So they have to be a Maskir Rishus from Toni. They don't want to be Maskir Rishus from Toni. It's very awkward. So instead they come up with a new idea. Reuven and Shimon go over to Levi, and they say, we're mevatel our Rishus to you. Now, even though, again, we're going to get complicated, we're going back to Siman Shin Pei Sif Daled, even though Reuven and Shimon are a Rabbim, they're two people, and they're being mevatel Rishus to Levi, who's a Yachid, and the Rabbim can't become a guest by the Yachid, so Reuven and Shimon don't become guests by the Yachid, so Reuven and Shimon cannot transfer from their houses to the Chutzner, because if they do, they're taking their Bittul Rishus back, but Levi theoretically would be allowed to transfer from his house to the Chutzner, and vice versa, because theoretically, Reuven and Shimon are mevatel the Rishus to Levi, now Levi owns everything. So maybe that works. Maybe if Reuven and Shimon are mevatel Rishus to Levi, so now we'll say Reuven, Shimon, and Levi are one, and now Toni is one guy with one Yid. Says the Mechaber, no, that does not work. They did it kedei sheyichashev ki yechidi etzalein Yehudi. Reuven and Shimon and Levi wanted to be mevatel Rishus so that they should be one keneged Toni. Says the Mechaber, ain't a moil. That is not effective. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cutting your base. Le'echad behem, Reuven and Shimon were mevatel Rishus to Levi, to one of them. Sheyal kol panim hu mutal l'taltal. So at least Levi should be able to transfer from his house to the Chutzner, or from the Chutzner to his house. Vehem yu asurin. They will still be usur, because again, they're a Yachid, they're a Rabbim, they can't become guests by a Yachid, who kumaysha disparla el simin shin peisiv dalet. Ice cutting Yud Gimel, ain't a mile, this is not effective. Says the Mishnah Berurah, why is this not effective? Dim kain batalta teres eruv mayoisay mavui. Because if this trick would work, you're wiping out the whole concept of an eruv. If this would work, then theoretically you could have a chutzner that has 20 Yidden living in it, and one guy, they'll all be mevatel Rishus to one of the Yidden, and now you'll say that you don't even need a Eruvei Chatzeris at all, and now everyone's going to carry it with no Eruvei Chatzeris. Sharei lo yitztarku liskar klal, because there's no being Maskir Rishus, there's no Erev, v'yuklu tamid levatel v'yishkach teres Erev, and the whole din of Eruvei Chatzeris will be forgotten. Today's share is being a little bit abbreviated, but Baruch Hashem, we did finish Reish Nun Amud Aleph. Thank you for listening, and Mirz Hashem, we will continue. I hope sometime on Sunday. I'm going to be in Cleveland by my children for Shabbos, but hopefully, even though Sunday is going to be a travel day, hopefully sometime I will squeeze in an opportunity at some point, hopefully, to record, edit, and post a shir. Have a wonderful Shabbos, everyone. It's nice virtually seeing you. Be well.